Yeah, hi,
Okay.
Callie.
Okay, hi, wait, let's, hello, okay, let's, bloop, bloop, bloop.
Hi, Callie.
Hi, hey, Michelle, hey, yes, hello, hi, good morning.
Hi, Callie.
Happy Thursday to you. Happy
Yeah, you
Thursday.
too.
How's it going?
You know what? It's going really well. It's finally like actual nice weather here.
Oh, that's good.
And oh, it's so great. So that's really nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going great.
And
And Thursday, that's the prosperity day of
it
the week.
is?
Thor's Day.
Thursday, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I started making friends with a bird that comes to my balcony.
You did?
Yeah.
Aw, I love birds. What kind is it?
A little one. I gotta figure out exactly what type of bird it is. But it's little, and it has a black beak, and it has, like, brown wings and, like, kind of a brown design on its chest. And then the rest of it is, like, tan. And it just sits, like, right next to my door and just chirps. And then I go out and I go, hi, hello.
Aww.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That gives me the chills. That's very special.
You're so sweet. Well, I know that you like to make friends with your squirrels, so...
And my birds, yeah.
And the birds, yeah. So, anyways, on to today's terrible topic.
I know.
We'll just start out with a little friendly animal befriending before we get into talking about the Oklahoma City bombing, which is like timeline-wise with what we've been talking about. It actually is closest to Waco. So we talked about Waco like a bunch of episodes ago. And then you've been doing this Bush series, which kind of is like provides really good context and like sets the background way more in depth, I think. Like maybe Waco is like, you know, the surface, and then the bushes are like where it gets like really, really deep and mysterious. So the Oklahoma City bombing happens like 2 years to the day after Waco. It happens on April 19th, 1995 at 9:02 in the morning. The Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City is bombed. The official story is that Timothy McVeigh was the lone bomber using basically a U-Haul filled with explosives. But, you know, the official story definitely does not line up with a lot of, like, witness testimonies and first-person accounts. There's just a lot of conflicting and contradicting information out there to the federal report. Because the government is always up to something.
Toot.
Yeah, toot. So today it's basically like we were calling this like conjecture show because it's a lot of theories. Like this, you know, like with Waco, we had just like way more information.
The ATF recorded everything at Waco.
Yeah. And there was, like, a really long grand jury trial. And it was, like...
Right.
Oh, and really the main thing is, like, when Waco happened, it was actually burned down by a government agency. And this building explosion supposedly happens not from the government. It's, like, a rogue terrorist. Even though...
A lone nut, Callie, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the story, even though, like, we'll talk about why that's just, like, kind of... Like, you would like, to believe that story, you have to, like, really just be like, oh, I believe the story because the government doesn't lie about stuff. But then it's just like, okay, literally the government lies about everything. So when you think about it in that context, it's like... The connections that Timothy McVeigh has to the government just, like, raise a lot of questions about, like, why this went down. And
yeah, you know, and also from Hollywood, we get this really skewed idea of how diabolical a single person can be. We get a really skewed perspective on that. So when we hear this lone nut theory, we're like, I saw Mission Impossible, or like whatever it is. You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, I saw that movie. Right.
Yeah. Like, people are really ready to believe. Also, it's like an easier story. Like, if that's the simple story. That you are just watching one person do a bad thing, and, like, he's going to get the death penalty, and then he gets lethally injected, and then it's over, and the bad thing is over, and everybody that did something wrong that day was punished. It's like...
It's so much less scary to think, well, this one monster showed up, and you can't keep monsters from coming into the world, but the system isn't made of monsters. In the system, people are doing the best that they can. That's a very comforting thought.
Yeah. Too bad when you actually try to do the right thing within the system, you get super murdered.
You sure do, don't you?
You get super murdered by the government.
Murdered. Like 2 shots in the back of the head, suicide, like Gary Webb. Gary Webb tried to do something about drug dealing, CIA drug dealing, and he committed suicide by shooting himself in the back of the head twice.
Wow, he must have been really flexible.
He was very flexible.
I can only hope that someday I will have that level of dexterity.
I know.
Okay, so here's a little backstory about Timothy McVeigh, which is, I mean, he is definitely, like, that name, I've known that name my whole life. Like, I guess
he's my birthday twin.
Oh, birthday twin. Wait, so he's a Taurus.
Yeah, he's a Taurus.
Oh, right. Nato's going to do the birth chart of him for our YouTube.
Yes.
Okay, that's going to be sick.
Yes. I know.
So I guess I was 6 years old when this happened. And I, like, remember it, you know? And it was, like, really scary. And that name is, like he's very notorious. Like, everybody knows Timothy McVeigh. You know, he's, like, domestic terrorist, whatever. So when the Oklahoma City bombing happened, he was only 26 years old.
So young.
Young man. He was a U.S. Army veteran, ? He definitely was in the Army, but whether or not he was still active in the Army is disputed. But he was a veteran of the Gulf War. He tried out for... This story goes... This is, like, Timothy McVeigh's own story and stories of his, like... what do you call people that you're in Army with? His Army... I don't know. Army friends. So he tried out for the Special Forces, and after a few days, he came back to camp like a changed man. And the story is that he was rejected. But he wrote a letter, like, the story is that he was rejected and he was sad, and that's why he was acting weird when he came back to camp. But he wrote a letter to his sister telling her that he was actually selected out of the Special Forces to participate in covert... This is a quote from the letter. Participate in covert operations to help run drugs to fund these operations and to assassinate security risks.
Okay, that's very believable for the time period, honestly.
Yeah, I mean...
Okay,
whether or not, like, I'm like, wow, I guess you're not really good at being covert if you're, like, writing this in a letter to your sister, but...
True.
I feel like when you think about, like, if that is something that was happening, and then, like, the timeline is, like, okay, he tries out for Special Forces, then he gets, like, recruited for this actually, like, really intense thing, and then he, like, returns back to camp acting all weird and, like, sketched out. Like, that is also something that I could see happening. Like, sure, he maybe was sad because he, like, didn't make the Special Forces, or he was acting weird because he found out he was going to have to do this, like, really weird job. Yeah, he did. And then he found out what that entailed.
Right. And, I mean, of course, there's the other thing of, like, he didn't get accepted in the Special Forces, so he made up some really crazy story to tell his sister. Like, well, and then I'm going to be the superhero of the world. Like, that's possible, too. But either way, him coming back acting really, like a different person is a big deal.
Yes, that is like definitely like a changing point moment. And yeah, we'll put it all out there. People can figure out what they think about it, you know. Okay, so McVeigh thought he was going undercover to investigate white supremacist groups in the U.S. and like set them up. Through this, he like, I don't know, he was saying that he was like doing this work for the Army. And at one point he like revealed that he had a superior who was Larry Potts, who was the assistant director of the FBI and the lead agent on the Ruby Ridge siege. Which, and this Larry Potts guy also played a role in the siege at Waco, which is just like, these two events, Ruby Ridge and Waco, happened in like close succession and both involved like kind of cultural separatists wanting to have a lot of guns. But like the Ruby Ridge people were definitely like white separatists, and then the Branch Davidians at Waco were just like Christians. They weren't white supremacists. Right. So the weird,
at all.
No, they were not. Yeah, they weren't at all. And which I just like to make a distinction because it sucks that they get lumped in with them because I feel like it's just really reductive.
And I think like a third of them, the Branch Davidians, were people of color. Am I wrong? Did I forget that wrong?
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It was definitely like, I mean, it was majority white, but it was not all white by any means. I mean, there was like 80 of them there, so.
Right.
It was, yeah.
But I think there was a higher percentage of like the ratio of black to white or people of color to white people at Waco was higher than the general society, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong.
Okay.
So yeah, we're just making that distinction because it's important. I feel like it's important to remember that like not everybody that wants the right to bear arms or whatever like is a white supremacist Republican. Like
no, we are not.
I know, no, we're not. There's like plenty of people like who just want to be able to have guns for whatever reason, and it has nothing to do with white supremacy. In fact, a lot of people it has to do with the exact opposite. So
yep, you betcha.
Yeah. So anyways, back to Timothy. Another sus thing is, you know, he's saying at this point after the Gulf War, he is like officially, quote unquote, not in the Army anymore, but his death certificate lists his occupation as U.S. Army and not like veteran. So it implies that he was like an active Army person.
Right, which we covered with like in another Bush episode with somebody else. They call it sheep dipping, where they make it look like you've left the CIA or the military. They make it look that way when really you haven't, and you're on the payroll the entire time. And it's called sheep dipping, which I honestly think that term. This is me theorizing, but I think that term actually means like you're like a wolf, like dipped in sheep's clothing. I don't know. That's the only thing I can come up with as to why they call it sheep dipping.
I could see that. But they just come up with, like, I feel like also it could just be, like, literally like a word jumble. Like, you pull two words out of the hat. Sheep. Dip. Now this is what we're calling this thing because...
Totally.
Like, nothing is allowed to, like, make sense because we're just trying to confuse everybody.
That's true. That's totally true.
Okay, so roll camera. It's 1995. Here's the political scene. Our boy Bill Clinton is the president. God, what a fuck! All these people. He's president. Apparently, like, I don't remember this, but like when I was reading it online, apparently his campaign like had a big gun control platform. So that is like a thing they want to do. Gun control. Which like yeah, it makes no sense. But like that, you know, they're banking on this fear of like, you know, like Reagan started this whole like crime.
Right.
And then the 80s that's like perpetuating, and then by the time Clinton's in office, it's like everybody's like, oh my God, crime, there's so much crime. And he's like, I'm going to ban guns because that's how you stop crime.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole, I mean, the whole issue between like whether or not it's the people who should be controlled are the arms dealers. They're always going to say, no, it's the people. We want to make sure arms dealers make as much money as possible, but we want to also use that to control and condemn the population. So, like, take your regulation where it belongs. That's what I have to say about that.
Yes, you're not wrong. In fact, you are right, is really the way I should say that. So Janet Reno is the Attorney General. So she is like the stupid loser who...
She's such a loser.
She's like got this whole like save the children, like I'm saving the children thing, which is like just fear-mongering. It's basically like satanic panic vibes. It's like the same thing. It's like all these things that you're saying you're like going to save the children is basically like a curtain over your true intention of just like demonizing any counterculture at all. Like the very condensed version of what I feel like Save the Children is,
I mean, the last time I saved some children, I didn't set a bus with 26 of them on fire. But hey, you do you, Janet, you asshole.
Yeah. Jesus. Fuck her.
Right? That's Waco, by the way, for anybody
definitely.
listening.
Yeah. It is horrible. It's like, you're not actually saving anybody. Like, you clearly don't care about saving children. You murdered all these kids at Waco. Like, they knew all these children were there at Waco. But I guess their official story is that they burned themselves down, which is such a fucking lie. It's infuriating.
You can tell it's a lie from the crime scene, honestly.
You can tell it's a lie from the crime scene. And, in our episode, we do that in great detail. So if you haven't listened to it, don't fuck
Go back and listen.
Don't fuck it up. And this bombing is 2 years to the day after Waco, so I think it's like the spiel.
Can I talk about that day?
Yes.
Yeah, so April 19th, this is what gets conspiracy theorists like really going on this one, is April 19th is an occult holiday. It's a satanic holiday. It goes from April 19th is the first day of this 13 days, right, till May 1st. And it's this ritual. They worship the fire gods like Baal, Molech. There's a couple of other ones, and it's a time for sacrifices, for like human sacrifices, in particular children. So it does give me a chill. I have to admit that. But the deep conspiracy theorists, when they look at Waco. And they're like, 26 kids died on that day. And then you've got all these kids that are going to die on this day. They're like, look, that's the day to do it. That's when you do your child sacrifices. So, I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm saying when you hear people talk like that, there's something underlining why they're saying what they're saying, whether or not you believe that, right? They didn't just pull it out of their butt. Like, this is an old ancient, ritual, occult ritual at least. I just think it's interesting, and the other one is also the Boston Marathon bombing happened on April 19th, which I then asked myself, I was like, well, does the Boston Marathon happen on April 19th all the time? So I went in to look, and the very first Boston Marathon was on April 19th in 1897. And the reason for that is it was a commemoration of the beginning of the American War in 1775, which started on April 19th. So it's like you do have so there's all this death from that war that started that day. Then the Boston Marathon is started in 1897 to commemorate that. And it's actually held on April 19th every single year until 1969, which I think at that point, just the way society had modernized, like everybody, you needed to be able to plan ahead, longer than just, right? So so they started doing it on the third Monday of every month. And in 2013, it happened to fall on April 19th. And so then this is just like kind of three more recent things where you get people saying like, there's that human sacrifice. Anyway, throwing that in.
Yeah, I mean, throw it out there. Like, we know that the Bushes are involved in Bohemian Grove, which is like...
We do.
For all intents and purposes, like, Bohemian Grove is entirely, like, symbolic. But they do these really intense rituals there that, like, Alex Jones, who I fucking hate and think should die.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he did break into Bohemian Grove and film it. The way he got in
He
was
did.
he told people there that he was with the Bush family, and they just believed him because
crazy.
he's this like tall white man from Texas. It is so crazy that he did that. He literally was just like, I'm with the Bushes, and they're like, come on in, sir.
Right.
Fucking wild. And he filmed.
It is.
He filmed the ritual, and they burn, like, I mean, you can literally find this footage on YouTube. I'm not bullshitting you. They had this giant statue of Moloch, the owl, and they are burning, like, they burn an effigy of it, and there's, like, what looks like a child on the platform of the owl. And I'm just like, you know, there's
the cremation of care. That's what it's called, right?
Yes, that is what it's called. Yes. Oh my god. Ugh.
So crazy.
Yeah, and it's
just the fact that they do that, even if it's symbolic, like most American people do not think that their politicians are doing that.
Yeah, and especially the ones that are actually doing this are like the white male Christian Republicans. Like, you know, all this like baby killer stuff is usually like really like an anti-Semitic thing. It's like an anti-Semitic lie where they try to like, where people try to say that like Jewish people are killing babies and all these like horrible things. And it's literally like, if that's happening, like, I mean, kids are dying. Kids died at Waco, and the people that did it was like the white Christian government. So it's definitely not Jewish people. It is like these Christian people who are in power.
With tax paid for weapons, they went and killed those kids.
Yeah, even though the same government that doesn't want you to have guns. Like,
yes, exactly.
So stupid. So annoying.
It's evil.
I hate that I say stuff like that too, and it like sounds like low-key right-wing, and I'm just like, I'm literally an anarchist. But this is just the truth, you know?
Mm-hmm. What is that saying? A broken clock's right twice a day?
Yeah.
You know, fuck it. What are you going to do?
I mean, amen. So... bombing is 2 years after Waco. Again, it's like another weird attempt to try and lump Waco in with these like white supremacists. So like they put McVeigh as like this white supremacist terrorist who's like avenging for Waco and like punishing the government for what they did at Waco. So it's like literally the Waco people, the Branch Davidians, were not white supremacists. The Ruby Ridge people were white separatists, but they weren't white supremacists trying to like bomb the government. They were literally just like, I want to live in the woods by myself with all my fellow whiteys, which is just like, okay, fuck you, you obviously suck. But they're not out here like bombing buildings, you know?
No, and I mean, like, also, like, good. That's a good place for you to go.
Yeah,
and
get out of here,
yourself.
Then. Just get the fuck out.
Yeah, that's
then.
great. Just go keep to yourself, you fucking honky.
Yeah, stay out. Stay the fuck away.
Great idea.
So the real commonality was just, like, they distrusted the government and they wanted to have guns. That's the only thing that, like, really links these two. Or these three people. Like, McVeigh, the Ruby Ridge thing, and the Waco people. It's literally just, like, they don't trust the government. Well, theoretically, McVeigh doesn't trust the government, and they all want guns.
Right.
So, also at this time, in the 90s, the government is, like, kind of... you know, the 80s... you know, all of America through the 80s and through today was very anti-black. I think at like the end of the 80s into the 90s, strangely coinciding with when the Bushes start to do like these dealings with the Middle East, then you start getting all this like anti-Muslim, anti-Middle Eastern propaganda, Islamophobia coming out into the forefront culturally.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. So that is the political scene of... That's a political backdrop, basically, of the Oklahoma City bombing. Clinton, Reno, Waco, anti-Muslim agenda.
Okay.
So again, the official narrative is that Timothy McVeigh rented a Ryder truck by himself in Junction City, Kansas on April 17th, 2 days before the bombing. And then him and Terry Nichols, who's this army buddy of his, like build the bomb together on April 18th. And then April 19th is when the bombing happened. Okay, so now I'm just going to start going through all the ridiculous, weird stuff of the day of the bombing. Okay. Number 1. Timothy McVeigh's targets are supposed to be the ATF office in the Murrah building. That's like the ATF and the DEA offices of Oklahoma City. Like, I'll get into that later, but I don't understand why he chose Oklahoma City. But ATF agents and DEA agents, they have offices in the Murrah building. They're the supposed targets, okay? Well, there weren't any ATF agents in the building. Apparently, they had all gotten tipped off to not be in the office that day.
What?
Weird thing 1. Weird thing 2. McVeigh was not actually clocked as the bomber until like a day and a half after it happened, but he was apprehended and put in jail 90 minutes after the bombing because he was driving like a ridiculous getaway car, like a cartoon. Like basically just like, please pull me over, because it was like a broken down car with no license plates.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And
that's ridiculous.
Also, like, when do you have like a white dude in Oklahoma that just like has an unregistered car being held in a jail for over 24 hours until conveniently he's there when, you know, he's a suspect, and then they can just be like, oh my God, guess what? We already had him.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So the Oklahoma City office of the ATF, again, located in the Murrah building, supposed target, 0 ATF agents were killed or seriously wounded. The husband, there's a lot of like accounts from family members of people who died. So one was the husband of somebody who died in the explosion, and he went and talked to somebody at the building who told him that the ATF was tipped off on their pagers not to come in that morning.
Okay, that starts to mirror things that happened at 9/11, just to do some foreshadowing. But yeah, go ahead. I know, right?
Well, you know, prior knowledge does become a big thing that, you know, even if you don't believe that like Timothy McVeigh was doing this for working for the government, you know, like via the government, the like prior knowledge thing is where like all the people in Oklahoma are like, you know, Oklahoma City citizens have definitely been like, what the fuck happened? You guys definitely knew something was happening. Why didn't you tell the daycare? Because like 16 or something children died because there was a fucking daycare in the building.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah. So anyways, like...
So the people of Oklahoma City have always thought this was really off, and they've been fighting for this and looking for answers all along. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So, right, the husband of somebody that died in the explosion went and talked to somebody, found out they got tipped off on their pagers. Okay, so the ATF story, this is so funny, and also just like, oh my God, you guys are so stupid. So the ATF story is that like 2 of their agents were in the building that day, and not only were they in the building that day, they were heroes. They were extremely heroic. They were like superheroes saving the day. Yeah, the first agent is Luke Franey. So this is the first person who was supposedly in the building at the time of the bombing. Luke Franey survived the explosion and then crawled out of his office onto a beam and then made his way through the building by punching through walls with his martial arts skills. This is their story.
What?
He's like, no, I was there, and then I was like, hey, yeah, and then I was like, cha-cha, and then I was like, and then I broke through the building, and then I'm outside. So then he's like, and then he like supposedly injured his hand, but then it's like, guys, this is so dumb because there's literally footage of this agent outside of the building, like shaking hands with people and like clearly not injured, like doing like a, you know, like a sturdy handshake. Just like, man,
He didn't break his karate chop hands.
yeah, my
his
man,
ninja hands.
my man says he punched through multiple walls, and then it's just like, I'm fine. Yeah, okay. He was not the only superhero that day. There was another agent that claimed he was in an elevator at the time of the bombing, and the elevator free fell for 5 floors. And then, after surviving a 5-story fall, he broke out and rescued several people.
Oh my God. Okay, Bruce Willis. Whatever.
I know. And, like, it's not like any of those people, like, it's not like anybody came forward and was like, yeah, he rescued me. So, this is just like, this is an agency of fools. Like, they are so dumb. And they're like,
so immature.
They're so immature, and they are like, you know, they couldn't do like, you could see the footage from Waco. It's like, these people are not competent. And now they're trying to say that they're like super action star heroes.
Oh my God.
It's a lot. So also, the fire department like confirmed that that no elevators experienced any free falling because none of the safety mechanisms on the elevators were tripped.
Okay, all right.
So the official story is Timothy McVeigh came there alone, but tons of eyewitnesses say they saw him there with another person. But the government decided not to pursue any accomplices that might have been there that day. Like, Terry Nichols, who was sentenced to, like, maybe life in prison or something, he was sentenced because he helped build the bomb. But nobody else was ever arrested for, like, actually being there with McVeigh, even though there's, like, tons of accounts of people being like, literally, I saw him with somebody.
It's amazing how many times law enforcement doesn't do that. Like, in watching, like, some of just, you know, these your basic, like, true crime murder stories or whatever, that actually happens a lot where people are like, well, you know, if there was this other person, the cops are like, no, we're interested in this one person. We don't want to hear about these other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's
weird
like,
how often they do that.
They just want to have their story, and they want to gather the evidence that fits their story, and then they want to be done. It's stupid.
Yeah.
Cops are dumb. The law enforcement, like, whoever decided how to do that had a bad fucking idea. And everything about it is bad. And it doesn't work. And it's awful.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to have people who are operating in good faith. And I mean, you know, 99.9% of the time, cops are not operating in good faith. They're like, we have a narrative, and just like what you said, we have a narrative, and we need to fulfill that narrative, and the more quickly we do that, the better we feel.
And then we
have lots of, and then we can go home. There's pressure on us from the public and the DA and all of this stuff, but we're also coming into, like, our jobs with a lot of, you know, bias. Everybody has bias. Like, I get that. But also, you are really talking about a culture that we see now has a bias that is not your average bias.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Yeah. It's not your average bias.
It's not your average bias.
No. Okay, so here's some more conflicting evidence and stuff. So there is an account of somebody seeing the Ryder truck, like the U-Haul, with Timothy McVeigh as early as April 11th. So, you know, that doesn't really change much about what happens, except it just definitely shows that the government just, like, didn't actually look into things or write things down correctly or actually talk to people or care about looking into it or, like, care about finding out the actual storyline of, like, what happened. There's like a ton of conflicting evidence in terms of like, you know, if the car bomb exploded in the front of the building, but the biggest crater was a pit in the back of the building, like, okay, how would a car bomb explode a giant pit in the other side of the building? Like, are you kidding me? Again, there's like a ton of accounts of a second person being at the truck, which just is showing that the government like is not using all the info if it doesn't fit their narrative. And you know,
Right.
like we were saying, it's just like a bunch of unfollowed up on leads and questions that were never investigated. And people that wanted to investigate it really weren't able to. Like the grand jury for this case was authorized to see surveillance footage from the Murrah building, but they weren't actually allowed to see the footage. Like they were authorized, but they were not permitted. So there's literally footage from the outside of the building on that day, and nobody was able to watch it outside of the government.
You know what? I love this too, because like then that fact that they were authorized is which is what's going to go down in the history, right? Like if anybody goes back to look at the archives and it's like, well, they were authorized to watch the footage, you know? And I feel like things like that happen consistently. Like you get the runaround on paperwork and this and that and this and that. And so that when you look back, it's like, well, everything seems to be in order. But then there was this other way in which you were like waylaid from what you needed to do or what you needed to look at, or there were missing pieces, and none of that it winds up being in the official archives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Oklahoma, you know, these Midwestern states who are like basically wanted to secede, they had a law where they could make a county grand jury basically like to investigate the FBI. So they did that, and they had to get like a bunch of signatures. They got like, you know, over 10,000 signatures from people in the county to do this, which maybe isn't like a big percentage, but it's still a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, it was like turned over to the Oklahoma County DA, and then it got like completely fucked up. It like didn't wind up really happening, and like people who had started the grand jury like were suspicious that their phones had been tapped and just like felt like they were really spied on, and it didn't get to go through. It's like they turned it over to the cops, they turned it over to the local police, and then it's like, okay, you had your fun.
Thanks for coming by.
And now it's over.
Wow.
So it's just,
you know, those are just normal people on a grand jury too. So for just normal people who like go in to do things like this, they're not in the frame of, I mean, like your everyday average person, especially in 95 or whenever this trial was happening, they were not even as much as today conspiratorially minded that everybody was going to be watching them. So they go there. So for these people, regular people during this time period to be like, I think my phone was tapped, because we also have to keep in mind, most of them probably didn't have cell phones. If anything, they had pagers and they had landlines, right? Yeah. Maybe a car phone. But like, so like phone tapping for regular people to say like, I think the government's spying on me. That was a really odd, very, very fringe point of view at the time. Not like it is now.
Yeah.
Wanted to throw that in.
For real. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Like, I'm sure a lot of people's lives were like really changed and their politics were really changed by witnessing this firsthand. And it's not something you're going to know if you're not literally there, being able to be like, oh no, well, my sister's cousin friend like worked there and like actually saw this and this and this. Like when you're like, you know, I was in Syracuse, so it's like everybody around me was just watching like the national news that's reporting, you know, what the cops are saying, because so many news outlets literally just read exactly what the police put out as fact and news. So that's the news that was like decimated to the rest of the country, or disseminated to the rest of the country, and you know, but people that were there no, it's not the truth. And then like further evidence of just like crazy suppression is that, you know, basically the Oklahoma, like what they were trying to do the grand jury on was the FBI having prior knowledge. So there was like a huge, like, prior knowledge was really the thing. Like, their issue wasn't like, oh, Timothy McVeigh worked for the government, we think. It was really like, obviously y'all knew what the fuck. So 2020 actually put together an hour-long story about prior knowledge as it relates to this case, and the feds prevented it from airing.
Oh, because 2020 is too credible. They'll let Alex Jones talk about this shit, but not 2020.
Literally.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Seriously, because it's like, if you're only hearing these things from right-wing nut jobs on their horrible radio shows, like, you know, you're not going to believe it. But it's like, I don't know. Sometimes what Alex Jones says is true. As much as it pains me
That's right.
to say that.
I know.
And he is an awful, horrible person who sensationalizes things for agendas that are terrible. Like, at the end of the day, like, facts are facts. And, like, that's it. Like, if you have a different political compass, like, you're going to use those facts for whatever your end goal is. But it's like, facts are facts. And, like, what people saw there is real, you know?
Yeah, and you just espoused the opinion Jeremy Scahill holds of Alex Jones. Like, he said something like, "Yeah, that man's a lunatic. Whatever good he's done, I mean, he's a lunatic." And I'm like, "That's it, exactly. I agree with you, Mr. Scahill." So just to throw that out there, like, you're definitely, anyone who's like looking behind the scenes at like what's actually happening, you know, is gonna say the same thing. They're like, "Well, Alex Jones didn't get everything wrong just because he's like a puppet or whatever now." But he was on the radio back in the day, in case people forget. Like, Alex Jones has actually been around for a long time.
Time.
Yeah. He was on the radio, and then he had, I think, a cable access show in Texas that started in the late 90s. Yeah. So, like, when I say, like, they'll let Alex Jones talk about it, he was literally talking about it at the time.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, he was talking about it at the time. And, you know, throwing out a lot of wild stuff in context of that. I mean...
Yeah, of course.
God, I'm not going to go...
He's a disinfo agent. And so part of his job is to tell the truth and then throw all this other shit at it. Like, that's his job. That's how disinfo agents work.
Yeah.
So that everything you're saying is no longer credible. So if Alex Jones ever said it and anybody repeats it, it's not credible anymore. That's the point of disinfo agents.
Like, I feel about him is like, well, obviously he's a right-wing nut job. I think probably he started, like, his early stuff that he was... Why do I know so much about Alex Jones? I was really fucking bored in quarantine, honestly. Long story short. But, like, his early stuff is just like... Well, first of all, his movies are hilarious. They're so bad and awkward. It's, like, very validating to watch because I'm just like, wow... How does anybody how does anybody look up to this guy? These movies are so awkward and, like, bad. But the thing is, like, I basically just feel like he ramped up his stuff because he realized, like, propaganda gets him more attention, basically. And, like,
absolutely.
He probably had, you know, he wasn't, at the beginning of his career, he wasn't, like, saying such ridiculous untrue, the frogs are turning us gay or whatever, like the tap water's turning the frogs gay kind of stuff. Like, he was just like, this veteran is getting his land taken by the government and we're going to report on it and we're going to help him get his house. And it's just like, all right, dude, like, okay. And now it's like, obviously something completely different. But I digress. He was talking about this at the time, though. Yes, he was. Yeah. And his story, his very much like, this is my story is that Timothy McVeigh was working for the government. But he was, like, way, way, way more deep into it. And not being like, oh, well, it could have been this. Oh, well, it could have been this. He was just like, Timothy McVeigh is a catalyst for the government. They always turn on you. They get you to come in the government. And blah, blah, blah. So...
I got such a good impression. You're so good at that.
Thank you. Even back in the, he was espousing some... I don't know. It's more just like he doesn't present any opposing viewpoints or, like, give any space for people to make their own ideas. He's, like, operating on fear only, like, trying to get people to be afraid so they believe him and they have to listen to him in order to, like, feel like they're It's the same thing with QAnon, dude. Okay, I'm getting so off topic, but like,
It's
the
our
same.
conjecture show.
This is conjecture show, and we're going off. But it is the same thing as QAnon. It's like, you think you have insider knowledge. You have to listen to this one person so that you have the knowledge, so you're safe. You want to keep others people safe, so you're trying to spread the knowledge. And anybody who doesn't believe you is working for the other side. So,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very culty.
Yeah, what a dumb cult. Okay, back to the Oklahoma City bombing, though. So we already are listing all these discrepancies. Let's list a bunch more.
Okay.
So there's a lot of discrepancies in terms of explosives. Like, the original report, the original official story was that the Ryder truck had 1,200 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. I don't really know anything. I honestly don't know anything about bombs.
Right.
But basically, it's
Me
like,
either.
the first story is that they had 1,200 pounds of whatever. The second story is that they had 4,800 pounds. Then the third story is that it has 7,000 pounds. So basically, it's like these completely inconsistent hypotheses, which is just like that. Okay, I didn't really include any information on this, but I'll just say what I read from memory, which is just like, you know, in Northern Ireland, they know a lot about domestic terrorism and bombings.
They do.
It's not a thing to not be able to know what was in the bomb. Like, you can figure it out. So for them to have all,
especially if you're the ATF, I'm sorry.
that's
hello?
their job.
It's your fucking job, dude. You better do it.
That's literally their job. Yeah. So it's like the fact that they weren't able to do that is not
That's ridiculous.
true. Yeah. It's just like, you do know what it is. Why are you being like this? So basically, there's no way that this car bomb could have caused the damage in the building. Long story short.
Right.
Now here is where we get like weird 9/11 vibes.
Okay.
There's doubt whether the blast from the car would have been strong enough to take out the concrete and steel beams in the building, which is very like, it's giving very like jet fuel can't melt steel beams vibes, you know, which
Right.
we'll get. To be honest, I've like never dove into 9/11 conspiracy theories, but I got a lot of context for it now for when we get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's its whole own genre of, like, because there's so many now. It's literally like a cultural genre, which I actually, like, whatever. But it's interesting. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's just like, this is similar to both World Trade Center bombings. It's just like, this is not consistent. Like, what you guys are saying happened isn't consistent with the actual damage caused. It doesn't make literal scientific sense that this damage could have happened. It's just like math, it's not, to me, it's like, how can that be up for debate? It's like science,
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Yeah. So, the people who were working on bomb squads and Oklahoma City cops even on interview say that they don't believe it could happen from one bomb in the way that the explosion happened and the way that the building was damaged. We're just if a bomb causes a path of explosion, how can some things in that path not be damaged, but then things behind that spot on the supposed path would have damage? It's just it doesn't make sense. It literally doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense when you think of another scenario, which there was a report done by a general, but I'm just I don't know if this general was in the Army at the time or not in the Army, but there was a report done where it concluded that the major factor in the destruction would have been caused by 4 different bombs placed at critical junctures on supporting columns in the building.
What?
Which is very 9/11, because I'm pretty sure that's a
9/11.
9/11 theory too. Whereas, like, it wasn't
Yeah,
the
I mean,
planes,
I feel like
the bombs. Like, it was,
right.
I mean, obviously it was the planes, but, like, it's obvious, like, it's also bombs placed at, like, critical junctures on the
Yes.
building.
Yes. I mean, that seems to be, I mean, yeah, we'll get into that, too. But the 93 bombing of the World Trade Center, it always seems to me like, I mean, they kind of were like, well, hey, maybe this will do it. Maybe this will really take those towers down, But I think in their minds, they kind of knew that it wouldn't. They just wanted to see how the bombs would work and how much destruction. Could they do it with a truck bomb? And then I think the answer was no. And then I feel like perhaps then you go to Oklahoma and you're like, well, what if we rig bombs on the beams? And then you see what happens. And then, I get chills. And then they're like, all right, now we're ready.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so remember earlier when we were saying how anybody that, like, has good intentions is murdered?
Yes.
Well, now we're getting to the story of the person who was murdered in this, in context with this. So there was a police officer, Officer Yeakey, Y-E-A-K-E-Y, in case anybody wants to look it up. It's a sad story. I know people are, like, super into true crime, so this could be more like a true crime thing. I personally am not, but this is the story.
Mm-hmm.
So this officer was, he was an Oklahoma City police officer. He was, like, early 30s, young, spry, hadn't seen any explosions caused by the government yet, optimistic, thinks things are good. So he's one of the first responders to the bombing because he was, like, giving somebody a traffic ticket a few blocks away, heard the explosions, was like, okay, guess what, you don't get a ticket, vroom, vroom, rushed over. He actually saved a bunch of people's lives. Like, he, unlike the ATF superheroes who were karate chopping their way to lies, he actually he actually saved multiple people's lives. So that's cool. I think that is cool, to, like, go into a collapsing building and, like, save people's lives. Like, thanks, dude. That's cool. Like, fuck the police, but that is cool that you did that. And, like, I've definitely said, like, because people are always make that argument, like, oh, not all police are bad. Like, some people, you don't think that anybody can enter into the police force with good intentions. I'm like, no. People definitely can enter into the police force with good intentions.
They do all the time.
And they either get fired or killed. So, like,
or
good
they
cops...
quit.
Right, yeah. Good cops are not cops anymore because they're either fired, killed, or, they quit. So he was, like, he was first responder. He was right there on the scene. He, like, saw a bunch of stuff. He would, like, because what he saw in the official report, like, did not match up to what he saw as a first responder. So he was, like, compiling research, and I'm sure he wasn't being quiet about it because, like, this is the first time you're probably seeing something that makes you, like, question the government and, like, police forces and, like, oh, are they lying, blah, blah, blah. So he's, like, compiling research at his house, and then he, like, rented a storage space. And then the day he was murdered, he was supposed to get dinner with a friend. He told his friend, like, I will be there as soon as I drop this stuff off at my storage space and shake these FBI agents that have been tailing me. And then he never goes to dinner and he gets murdered. And, like, he's found the next day, like, in a ditch. Like, so fucked up. He has handcuff wounds and was stabbed 13 times. But his death certificate lists this as suicide.
These monsters.
And, like, these cops, like, told his family that he killed himself. And, like, it's really sad. Like, they interview, like, his family and stuff, and they're basically just like, we thought that, when officers died or whatever, that, like, the police would, like, really show up for us and, like, be there to be supporting of us. But, even if somebody dies and you're like, like on your, like one of your neighbors has like a friend that dies or something, it's like you would probably like bring them a casserole or whatever. Like,
Yep.
not a casserole to be found from the Oklahoma City Police Department to the family of this guy. And, you know, they felt really abandoned. Like, his family felt really abandoned.
Yeah.
And that's, like, really fucking shitty.
Well, and the wounds on his body, and then for them to say it's a suicide, that's such a smirking disrespect. I mean, they're all, you can see just in that they're like, we can do whatever we want. We want to remind you we can do whatever we want. We're saying that your person stabbed themselves 13 times because we can do whatever we want. It's terrible. It's a
awful.
spit in the face to that family. Yes.
Yeah, it is. Fuck the police.
And this he was a black man, is that right?
He was black, so it's definitely got like other layers of fucked upness of, you know, like just treating people that way. Treating anybody that way, especially treating black people this way. It's just like disgusting. It's disgusting.
And black
behavior.
families this way.
It's like it's just fucked up. Okay, so my like biggest question that I had that I didn't get an answer to was like, why the Murrah building? Like, if this is a retaliation for Waco, which is in Texas, and McVeigh is from outside Buffalo, and, you know, the government headquarters are in D.C., there are big cities, like, why would McVeigh choose the ATF office in Oklahoma City? Like, I didn't find an answer to that. And, like, maybe there's an answer and I didn't come across it, and I'm going to sound really uninformed on this podcast. I hope not. But I couldn't figure it out. It wasn't, like...
Okay.
I mean, I'm just going to Google this. Right? Waco evidence at Murrah building...
It should have been, I mean, that should have been obvious from the beginning. I mean, Timothy McVeigh should have really stated why he chose that building to the attack the ATF when ATF has buildings all over the place.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
like,
he did
why
not.
that specific
He did
building?
not.
And he did not.
No, he said
That's
his attack
pretty
was for
wild.
the ATF. And it's just like, well, why this building? Like, I don't get it. So...
Right. Because he didn't live in Oklahoma City at the time, did he?
No, he was from outside Buffalo, New York. So, like, really, really close to Canada.
So he just threw a dart at the United States. Was like, oh, I'll take that ATF building. I mean, is that
I
what
have
the?
no
I don't know,
idea.
it's
Like, I
ridiculous.
literally have no idea.
Okay.
But, you know, there's like two things that were stored in that building that could have something to do with it, especially if you are maybe believing that this is like, he was like a puppet of the government, is that evidence of the Whitewater investigation, which is a Clinton scandal. And if you want to talk more about that, feel free. But let me just like summarize real quick that it's like evidence from that scandal was in the building. And then evidence on an investigation into Clinton's drug running for Bush Sr. through Arkansas was also stored in that building.
Oh, whoa. Okay, that's fascinating because, you know, with the Whitewater situation, the Whitewater land development scandal, that's like, you know, Bill and Hillary Clinton got involved with Jim and Susan McDougal, who to do this land development in Arkansas. And what the charge really what it was, and what wound up happening, of course, Bill and Hillary get off on this, and then, I mean, probably literally get off on it, and also didn't, we're not charged. But, but Jim McDougal winds up doing time. He's a politician on and off. Susan McDougal, she did 18 months in prison because she would not answer questions about Bill Clinton, which I actually find really interesting because I'm just like, ooh, it gives me like a crazy feeling in my chest. But it's just one of those things where if you're like sitting there and you're like, I can do 18 months in prison, or I can face like the Clinton Bush vehicles, like consequences.
Yeah.
You know, you're
what
like,
do I
I think
get
I'll
if
say nothing.
Like, what do I get if I spend 18 months in jail to help these people out?
That too.
You know?
That too. But turning against them, you are much better. You have much better chances of surviving prison than you do the Clinton Bush vehicle. Just saying.
Yeah.
If it ever comes down to that, to pick wisely, people. But it's like, what Whitewater really boils down to is, at least officially, is that Jim McDougal actually had embezzled money from the government agency that he worked for, and then had tried to cover that with funds from the SNL. So Whitewater is actually the SNL scandal, the savings and loan scandal. So that's actually what happened.
Don't say that when you're looking it up. Like, where did you find that? Like, I read the whole Wikipedia about it, and I tried to read some articles about it, but I really was just like, this just seems like some weird real estate, like, loan situation. Well, I didn't know it was, like, embezzling government money.
Well, they kind of, in the Wikipedia article, they gloss over it a little bit, because they're like, because he was taking it from, you know, this thing, and he was taking it from the savings and loans, and then he was going to replace it once, you know, his development paid off or whatever. So they gloss over it a little bit so that you don't realize that these two scandals are actually the same scandal.
Yep.
So
I did not pick up on that.
Right. I was like, oh, there you are. You know, I probably read it a couple of times, and I was like, oh, I see.
Wow.
What we're doing
Hidden
here.
in plain
Good
sight.
times.
Can't hide from Michelle.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely hidden in that Wikipedia. You kind of have to have a little nose for what's happening here already to pick up on it.
Yeah.
So, and then, like, too, the whole thing with Whitewater and the savings and loan scandal, it all comes back around in the Kenneth Starr report about Monica Lewinsky. And that's actually where all of your conspiracy theories, which is after Oklahoma.
Yes, it is after. It's the same year, that. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. All right. Well, it's, you know, the Starr report comes out, like, later, after all of this has happened, and he brings all the Whitewater savings and loan scandal up, which is where you start to get all the conspiracy theorists start coming in on it, and they start really questioning why Vince Foster killed himself. But I honestly don't.
Not another suicide.
It is another suicide, but I think there's a pretty good chance. I mean, I would have to really snoop around some more. But I think that there's a really good chance that Vince Foster maybe actually did kill himself.
Yeah.
He did feel guilty about some things that he had done involving this embezzlement and all of those scandals. And I could look around into this more. I mean, you know, but I don't necessarily like to dive into the deepest conspiracy waters first, right?
Though, Michelle, like, I don't think these people feel that guilty.
That's actually a good point. You may be right about that.
So
maybe
think
he'll come
Jeffrey
back
Epstein
up later.
would feel guilty. I do not think that guy killed himself.
I don't think so. Yeah, right. No, you're right.
Like, wow,
you're right.
Literally a monster. How do you not feel guilty? Like, Harvey Weinstein doesn't feel guilty. None of these people, none of these fucking people
Harvey
feel guilty.
Harvey Weinstein's the victim, Callie. He's a victim of woke culture.
Oh my God, thank you for
the woke
telling
mob
me.
got
It was a woke mob. Oh my God, of course. Classic woke mob.
The classic woke mob. So anyway, that's Whitewater, but I think it's much more interesting. The Iran-Contra, the Iran-Contra covering up, that's huge.
Yes.
And, like, that's actually part of, you know, like I mentioned kind of offhandedly, I mentioned Gary Webb earlier. I mean, drug dealing, the CIA drug dealing stuff, there's lots of dead reporters as far as, like, that is concerned, right?
No, I hate dead reporters. I don't like that.
It's horrifying, but it's one of the main things that they want to cover up is CIA drug dealing and government drug dealing, because that's how they pay for their proxy wars. And I can go on and on about why the need to cover up their drug dealing is so important. And so, like, if there were files in that building that connected the Clintons to the Iran-Contras, that was really a problem. That's a really big problem.
I cannot find any answer to my question of why did he choose this building unless I am believing, unless I am choosing to believe the path that, like, this was something orchestrated by the government. Because the only
Right.
reason that makes sense to me was that they wanted to destroy this evidence and cover it up with blaming it on, like, a Waco thing and all these other things.
Right.
Because
Whoa.
other than that,
Right.
it's like, I cannot find an answer to why it would be this specific building.
Right.
But then
Okay.
it's like these
Yeah.
two very, like, oh, okay, like, destroying evidence, you know, which they love to do.
Yes.
Like, they love to do that, you know.
Yeah, they do love to do. Well, you know what? If anybody listening knows why, you know, follow Secret Antenna on Twitter and DM us. Like,
Yeah.
you know, let us know why it's that ATF building, and we'll cover it in a. We'll cover
we'll
it
do,
in
like, a
another
bonus,
episode.
like, okay, fact checking. Sorry, I said that. But, like,
Yep.
I couldn't find anything, and I was looking.
Yeah.
And I mean,
No, it's a great question.
I'm not like a.
I don't remember
expert
anybody ever
researcher.
asking that question before, though. Like, I've never heard anybody ask that question before, personally. So, like, to me, that's an astute question, and it should have an answer. Usually,
Thank you so
bombers
much.
know why they're bombing a certain thing.
Yes. Like, once you get to, like, the World Trade Centers, like, you can. That it's a way
Mhm.
more believable, like, okay, they bombed that because it's like the tallest building in the city, and it's like representing capitalism or whatever.
Right. I mean,
you know?
It's technically a military target. So, like, that's when they, took that down, you're like, well, sure. I mean, if you were in any other country, you would clearly see the World Trade Center as a legitimate
Pentagon,
like, target
yeah.
of war.
Yeah.
And the Pentagon, yeah. So, like, you're like, oh, yeah, you would hit those things.
Yeah,
of
like,
course.
sure. But
You
this,
know,
I'm still
right,
just like,
this?
there are ATF offices everywhere. There's
Bigger ones, probably, than that
bigger
one.
ones that are more directly connected with that. Like, there's plenty of ATF offices in Texas. Like, there's ATF offices in Buffalo. Like, they are around. So, like, why are you going to Oklahoma City, man? Like, make it make sense. And then the only way to me that it makes sense is knowing that this evidence was in that building.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It really does all start to come together with that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it's like, well, how do you know that evidence is in that building? Well, I don't know how to answer that except for that was in what I read. But
yeah, okay,
so
good
maybe
point.
that's a lie.
Hey,
Maybe it's a
again,
lie and it wasn't there, but
then follow Secret Antenna on Twitter and DM us.
Yeah.
We'll make it up to you.
yeah. Okay, so other weird shit. Okay, in reference to theories that McVeigh had assistance from others, he responded with a well-known line from the film A Few Good Men, saying, "You can't handle the truth." And then he goes on to say, "Because the truth is, I blew up the Murrah building, and isn't it kind of scary that one man could wreak this kind of hell?" And it's just
What
like,
the fuck?
you're blowing my mind, Timmy, because when you say you can't handle the truth, I feel like you're talking about your secret government things. And then when you follow up with this weird sentence, like, yeah, it would be kind of scary if one man could do that. I know one man didn't do this. Like, even if I'm not believing the government pipeline thing for him, like, the dude that rented the truck out literally was like, he was with someone else. He was with another person.
Right.
So it's just like, it was never one person. And it would be really, really scary if that was the truth. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm seeing the breadcrumbs from what he's saying.
Yeah. No, I get you, because it sounds like really ridiculous and rehearsed and like very like, I don't know, like the opening to like a bad pulp novel, honestly.
Yeah.
And, and two, it's steering us in a direction to tell us how to feel about it. Because he's like, isn't it scary that one man can do this? And my answer to that is not as scary as the fact that the government is doing this all the time. But thanks for stopping by.
Yes.
Thanks for leading us, telling us which direction to take. Which one of these things is scarier, that one man can do this or that the government orchestrates things like this?
Yeah.
I take the latter is way scarier to me.
And McVeigh said, like, you know, because there's like a lot of stuff you can read of like stuff that he said, and he was literally like, I learned this tactic from being in the war. I learned this from being in the Gulf War. You literally showed me that if a government is doing something wrong, you attack them, and it doesn't matter who they're blowing up. But it's like our government feels that way. Like, I have no doubt that the government would attack itself domestically to do whatever, because internationally they're attacking hospitals with children and killing people all the time with no regard. Like, it's not, there's no focus to their destruction. It's just chaos.
And within the executive branch, which is, you know, holds within it the CIA, as we've talked about before, the allegiance of the executive branch is not with America. Their allegiance is with Saudi Arabia, Israel. Like, we know for sure.
Yeah.
Like, is their allegiance with something else? I mean, these people are running a game that what we see on the face of it, we are shut out of their game. We don't really know what they're doing. I can tell you, but we know from looking into this that the United States government, especially the executive branch, is absolutely 100% beholden to the Saudi royals. If they don't do what the Saudi royals want, we don't get gasoline.
Yes.
So you know what? Just like, you know, shut it down right there. Anything else, you know, any other questions you may have, I'd like to refer you to item A.
Yeah,
okay?
and like
that's
so
it,
much
you know?
of this dealing is like making sure that the people involved in the deal don't go to jail. Like, Bill Clinton can't go to jail. The Bushes can't go to jail. They can't get caught doing anything. Like, they are key players in this deal of oil, which goes along with like their grand plan of basically just like amassing wealth and power.
Right.
Which is a generational, you know, planned out path started by, you know, Poppy's dad, or maybe even older, and like a many generation plan that is like, you know, they are going to do stuff to protect the plan. I mean, that's obviously like my belief. Like, I am definitely believing like there is a generational plan from the Bushes to like amass power and wealth. I believe that. And like I also believe global dynasty, and I also believe that that they would do anything to maintain their power, including like killing a bunch of kids and blaming it on this 20-something veteran, you know, quote unquote veteran.
Absolutely. You know what? I want to add in one personal thing here. In 1995, I was doing my undergraduate work, and we didn't have laptops back then. We had desktops. And when you would click on, you'd hit my hard drive and turn on my hard drive. When my computer powered up, you would hear Jack Nicholson say, "You want the truth? You can't handle the truth."
Are you serious?
Like, yeah. So, like, at the time, that was a movie line that, like, everybody said. I even had it. It was my startup in my desktop.
Oh, my God, that's so funny. So, like, sure, like, a really common thing to say, weird in context with, like, what he's saying. I don't know. That's just, like, so weird.
And what he said afterwards was weird. But it is, just to contextualize the fact that he used that line from a movie, you kind of heard that everywhere. You know, you'd be like in the CVS, and like drunk people would be like, "You want this shampoo? You want the truth? You can't handle the truth." You know what I mean?
You want shampoo?
Everybody, you know.
You can't handle shampoo.
Shampoo, yeah, exactly. But all in the big context, and him, and also, as we've discussed before, like pop culture elements can also be part of, like, if the government is behind this, those kinds of phrases and books and images and things like that can be triggers for a variety of things that they may be like implanting in terms of like conditioning the mind or whatever. I'm not going to go so far as to say brainwashing right now, but conditioning the mind, leading the mind, setting the mind up is something I think they do.
Yes.
I mean, I've just described going into the military. So
Yep. Okay, so just got a couple more weird things to talk about.
Okay.
This is more just like a anecdote that I thought was interesting. Is McVeigh instructed his lawyers to use a necessity defense, which is basically just like McVeigh saying that he was in imminent danger from the government, and it was like a self-defense thing. And McVeigh argued that imminent did not necessarily mean immediate. And they would have argued that his bombing of the Murrah building was a justifiable response to what McVeigh believed were the crimes of the U.S. government at Waco. I mean, they didn't wind up doing this. Honestly, his trial was so fast. I think they said it was like 6 weeks versus like the O.J. Simpson's trial, which was like, let me look it up.
Oh, yeah.
How long was the
Well, did that just end right before this?
The O.J. Simpson trial was 8 months long. I don't remember. I'm just using it as.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, it was a recent big trial, and that trial lasted 8 months, and this trial lasted 6 weeks.
That's wild, huh?
They just don't fucking care. This is literally terrorism, and
it is literally terrorism.
And they're making the trial like a month and a half. It takes us a month and a half to research an episode.
No shit.
Oh my god. Yeah.
No doubt.
So then,
and they destroyed the rest of the building pretty quickly, right? Because only part of the building came down.
They did destroy the rest of the building really, really quickly. I don't have the exact timeline for that, but you're right. That is a point to bring up. Like
within weeks, I think.
It is within weeks. It's definitely within weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
that's nuts.
That's absolutely true.
That's unacceptable.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then
it
you
should
think
have been
about
there.
like the fucking Hard Rock 2020. 2019 or whatever, the Hard Rock Hotel collapses in New Orleans.
Oh,
and
right.
it takes like an entire fucking year to blow up the building. And it's just like an empty structure with like literal dead bodies in it.
Literal dead bodies
over
in it.
a year, not being dealt with, just sitting there. And then they can take care of this in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, that's a really good. That's a good comparison. That's an excellent comparison. You're absolutely right.
Miserable.
So there's
comparison.
no reason not a miserable comparison, but so it just saying like there's literally no reason to demolish a building. I mean, because they can say, well, it's upsetting for the community, but it's like Hard Rock is upsetting for the community. They don't give a fuck about that. So let's not pretend like the government gives a shit if your community is traumatized by terrorism. Please stop.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, literally.
Okay, so then more fuckery of the government. So Timothy McVeigh was scheduled to be executed. He said that he would rather die than be in jail. So 6 days prior to his scheduled execution, the FBI turned over thousands of documents of evidence it had previously withheld to McVeigh's attorneys. As a result, U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft, I guess it changed, announced McVeigh's execution would be delayed for a month. So it's like you literally think you're about to die in 6 days, and then the government's like, and you want to die, and then the government's like, hee. Now you gotta wait another month.
Of course.
Yeah. Which is just fucked
up. Even trying to save his life, they would have killed him that day.
Yeah. Literally.
Yeah, it's control is so crazy like that. It has no meaning at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's just a lot of weird stuff that all in context is just like, wow, I don't really know. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then the last thing that I really have to talk about, which I think is more of like just planting a seed of like a person that like appears through a lot of these stories in a weird way, is this guy, Dr. Jolyon West.
Oh, Dr. Jolly.
So we talked about him in like our first, QTV, which was like the prereq to Secret Antenna, basically like our first one. We talked about MK Ultra, and I learned about Dr. Jolly. Well, actually, it was even before that. It was like before we ever started doing any of this, when we just like were having these phone calls talking about the Unabomber and just being like, oh my God, and this, and oh my God, and that. And then we were like, oh, we should talk about this more. So it was like, through talking about the Unabomber and like MK Ultra, like you kind of introduced me to this Dr. Jolyon West, who was like, he worked at what it was like USC.
Yes, well, he worked all over the place. So his full name is Louis Jolyon West, and people called him Jolly. And he is most known for being the right-hand man of Dr. Ewan Cameron, who was the architect of the, confirmed and utterly torturous MK Ultra program. So there's plenty out there for people who want to look that up. We have an episode about it. We'll probably talk about it more in the future. It's not a conspiracy. The government was running torturous mind control programs,
MK
and that is
confirmed.
a thing that they did.
Yes.
MK Ultra is confirmed. And so he was, Louis Jolyon West, Dr. Jolly, people called him, was central figure in MK Ultra, right? So even after MK Ultra comes out, why doesn't this man lose his work life? But he doesn't. So anyway, who he is he's an American psychiatrist. And this is interesting because this is really his cover for everything. You're like, why is he always there? He's like Henry Kissinger or something. You're like, wait, why is he always there? But his cover for that is his specialty is he deals with people who have been taken to the limits of human experience. So, which if you stand back from it, you don't need a lot of psychiatrists who specialize in that. You don't need as many psychiatrists who specialize in that as you do people who specialize in borderline and depression, right? This is taken to the limits of human experience is supposed to be something that only happens to a very small percentage of us. So the fact that then you're like, there he is again. He's around. There he is. We can find him with Manson and Kaczynski and Patty Hearst and, Sirhan. You can find him everywhere, sometimes before, sometimes after. But the cover for that is, sometimes both. The cover for that for him is really well, that's my job. I'm actually the only person in the world who really does this, So anyway, that's who he was. Interestingly, and I don't think this actually means a lot, but he started his work at the University of Oklahoma. But I know. And at first I was like, And then I was like, wait, no, because he's literally he's everywhere all the time because of what he studies. So he's been at UCLA, he's been at Los Angeles, he's been at Cornell, he's been at many, many colleges as a teacher, as an experimenter, a variety of things, Harvard. He was behind the scenes at that stuff with Kaczynski with the torturous experiments Harvard did on the Unabomber before his bombings. Jolly was behind the scenes, but we can't say that he was mind controlling Ted Kaczynski. Jolly was behind the scenes at the meth clinic lab hippie thing in Haight-Ashbury, where Manson brought all the girls to get psychologically tested and get free methamphetamines. He was behind there. We can't really say he was mind controlling Charles Manson though, right? You'll never ever be able to actually tie Dr. Jolly to these, to setting these people up for these crimes. However, he is constantly there, and he is someone who we know was involved in torturous mind control experiments. That was really his life's work. Yeah. So when you see him on the other side of these things, and he's like, let me evaluate this guy first, I can't help to say because you want to debrief your patsy, or because you want to see how your handiwork went down. That's why you want to be the first person in there. I don't know. So the Sirhan, Jack Ruby, he was part of, he was behind the scenes with Jack Ruby, who shot Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, yeah.
Who looked at the camera and said, I'm a patsy.
Oh, yeah. Sirhan was the JFK assassinator.
Oh, yes. He was Robert Kennedy.
Oh, Robert Kennedy. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, but both of the Kennedy, all the Kennedy shooters, we can find Jolly behind the scenes. Yeah. The Sirhan thing's really interesting because another psychiatrist had interviewed Sirhan right after the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald. And that psychiatrist came out. He was, as a psychiatrist, you'd be very, excited to discover this. But he came out and he said, I know this sounds crazy, but I think he's hypnotized. And people were like, well, what are you saying? This is some kind of government thing? He's like, no, I think maybe he accidentally hypnotized himself. This psychiatrist at the time, wasn't thinking along the lines that we think today with all these conspiracies. He was just a doctor who's like, holy shit, you all, I think we may have our first Manchurian candidate. And then, of course, everybody's like, that guy's crazy. He's a kook. He's a quack, all these things. So he was written off. And who comes in? Dr. Jolly. Who's like, nope, right? He's like, let me clean this up. Let me handle this for you. Which might actually be why, after Sirhan, Dr. Jolly was like, make sure I'm the first one in there. Right? Because we had Bradley discovered that, I'm speculating, but Bradley discovered that I had hypnotized Sirhan. So let's make sure that doesn't happen again. Yeah, conjecture episode 100%. Yeah. But I mean, hey, I'll tell you what, it fits. But when you start to really look at these stories, it fits.
It does. And there's just kind of like an interesting line that comes through with the Dr. Jolly and McVeigh, and it's this. Mm-hmm. Dr. Jolly consults McVeigh's defense team. There's a guy, Dr. Mm-hmm. John Smith, which sounds like a fake name, but whatever. He was the protege of Dr. Jolly. He went on to be McVeigh's doctor in prison. And now it's reported that Dr. John Smith, protege of Dr. Jolly, is one of the head doctors at Guantanamo Bay.
Ew! Okay, so Guantanamo Bay, you and I have discussed this quite a bit, is believed to be a continuation of the MK Ultra program.
Yeah. That is, that's a pretty common belief, I think. And I'm excited and afraid to get more into, because we're getting to this point where we're going to be talking about, 9/11 and then the Iraq War and then Guantanamo Bay. I mean, it's just naturally coming, this is this is coming next. It is. I didn't expect us to, even go in this direction, but there's, literally it's just such, a path. It's, we're just following the path, and this is literally the path.
Yes.
So
this is where it's heading. I agree. Yeah.
It's just wild to me to have that kind of direct connection from this to Guantanamo Bay.
I agree. That's wild. I'd never heard that before. That for me, it seals the deal on this thing.
Yeah.
That connects the dots for me, kids.
And then which we'll get into more if we which we definitely need to redo our MK Ultra episode. Maybe we should just do that next because we already did it and it's so interesting.
Oh, maybe so.
But I remember you saying that there was certain personality types that were sought after to try these mind control things, and psychiatrists concluded that Timothy McVeigh had depression, narcissistic personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorders.
That gave me a
which
chill.
Are common.
Schizotypal would be. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, conjecture show. Now we're just kind of ending with some seeds of just some stuff to think about.
Where we're heading. Yeah, we're going to be doing 9/11, more MK Ultra, following this path. It's just seeds to think about. I mean, there's so many things that we'll never know the answer to. But I don't think that means that we can really close the book on them. To me, they're open stories that need to be continue to be discussed, because as we see, our contemporary moments unfolding, do we see connections back to what I would consider open cases or open wounds, which are cases we can't close because the government literally won't give the people the information they need to close these cases. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think that we can just say, oh, well, we'll never know, and then just stop talking about it. That's a dream come true for these mind controller people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and also you and I are going to be creating a space where we do more conjecture shows, wild, bare-ass conspiracy thrown against we'll say anything in that space.
Yeah, because one thing, I feel like we don't, because, I feel like both of us want to be, not, I feel like, as, just who we are, we're not cis men, we're anarchists. We're fringe members of society. We're definitely used to not being believed about our opinions Absolutely. Or things that we say. Mm-hmm. So it's I think both of us are very cautious about what we say on the show in terms of making sure it's something that is fact check provable,
Yes.
documented, yada yada yada. But both of us are also like occultists and very
Right.
spiritually inclined and have like a lot of other thoughts about a lot of other things that we might not talk about in this space, just to keep this space like a you cannot come for me, I have receipts space. So so now, yeah, we're like, I hope like by maybe the fall, I think is our goal, that we'll like have
That's our goal.
have a separate space where like it'll be like, I think our plan is to do like a Patreon, which even though like paywalls, like, yeah, we don't love paywalls, but also it's like, even if it's like $1 a month, like just having to it's like a more intentional interaction, you know. At least like I'm used to having all these people on Instagram, interacting with them, and it's like the least intentional thing on all time. Like once you go into a space where people have to like actively choose to be there, I think as a creator, it becomes like a safer space for expression, because I'm just like, you're actually here because you want to be here. You're not here to like watch me fail. You're here because you like want to learn more and explore that. So I'm excited for us to have
Me too.
that space, and hopefully we can do like some live shows where we can like video chat with people who listen to us, and
love that.
it would be so cool.
Yeah.
So
It'd be
hopefully we
so
can do
cool.
that.
And yeah, be able to talk about more magic, more cult as it deals with politics and history. I mean, that's a fascinating topic. And then also to just, like I said, you know, like be wild bear-assed about it, where you can just kind of throw some stuff out there and we'll know that people are not there looking to twist what we're saying, but are actually there to have fun with us. And so we are going to I'm so excited to create that space. So yeah, so September, I think, is our goal for that. So it's soon. It's awesome.
So soon. And then also probably even sooner, we'll do another YouTube episode with Nado doing like a chart reading for Timothy McVeigh. Which these
we're gonna
chart
do
readings are just funny to me. And I
know, they're
really,
great.
really
She's having
like
a great
it.
time with it.
I
know.
love it.
She's having a great time with it.
It really just like
So,
it makes me feel like I have a deeper understanding of these people, and then we can just throw wild things out, and it's really fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. So we'll be Nado is working up Timothy McVeigh's chart as we speak.
Wow.
And then also working on, I don't even think we've mentioned this. This is, you know, also on our plate, Walt Disney. So she's been working on Walt quite a bit.
Sick. Okay, right.
Yeah.
I need to. Yeah, we have so many more episodes planned that aren't even
We
on this
do.
direct path. Like, I'm really excited. So,
yes, me too. So, wow. Thank you for all of that information, Callie.
yeah, thank you.
Like
You have so much
edified.
information. This was fun to do, and you've been doing so much of the research. So I feel good about maybe taking a little off your plate and still being able to have Secret Antenna episodes.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. All right.
Okay.
Well, until next time.
Till next time.
See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.